Hey there, everybody. This is your Florida Center's FASD Collective Shifts That Work, where we're going to talk to you about survival, success, and everything in between. For those of you who may not have joined us before, we'll do a quick little hello of who's who, and then we will just dive on into our conversation. I'm Jen. I have a 11-year-old with fetal alcohol, and I have 4 kids in total. Rosemary?
Hi, I'm Rosemary. I have two young adult children who have FASD, and one of them has the full syndrome of FAS.
Crystal?
Hey, I'm Crystal. I have 7 kids in total. I have 4 that are on the FASD spectrum.
And Pam?
Hi, I'm Pam. I have one son who has FAS, and one is plenty for me.
I think many of us might have felt that way some days too, Pam. All right, guys. So here at the Florida Center, we have a really cool training coming up that will be hosted by Barb Clark. The title is The Big Three. It's where she's going to get into some really cool details about the raging, lying, and stealing. And as a group, that kind of got our brains thinking about what our families and the caregivers that we work with have experienced pretty often. And so this is just some tips and ideas and some ways to think a little bit differently for those of us who are in the trenches when it comes to having a kid with some really big struggles. Um, Rosemary, I tell you all the time, this is one of my favorite ways to think. Will you tell us a little bit about how you have reframed the stealing thought process with our kids?
Sure. I call it the see it, want it, take it situation, aka stealing in most people's worlds. And it simply means that we would not expect a younger child, like 2, 3 years old, to understand ownership of belongings. And we do expect children when they're 6, 7 or so to understand taking other people's things, but our children have dysmaturity, which means they are usually not to the level of their biological age, and you have to meet them at the age that they are. So there is no moral decision, and as parents, we don't fail them in teaching them those moral things about not taking other people's belongings. But in their mind, because they're so impulsive, they see something, they want it, and they just take it without any connection to a consequence or it being a bad choice or an inappropriate choice. So the goal is to take away the temptations and monitor what they're doing at all times, particularly in the grocery store checkout lane. Lots of temptations are right in hand's reach there. So it often means not taking your child with you when you grocery shop to avoid getting in trouble with the law because they don't understand ownership and just impulsively help themselves. So when you reframe it to thinking from how they see it instead of what the world expects, you are more able to keep them out of trouble in the first place, locking things up or labeling things so they understand what is actually theirs.
That was such an aha moment for me when I first heard you say it that way. It really helped me think differently about my kid who would wander through the house and just randomly pick things up and take them to his room and things that he knows are not his, right? So I really appreciate that perspective. And then you touched a little bit on, like harm reduction, right? Making it where things aren't available. And Crystal, I know this is an area that you kind of hone in on. Tell us what that looks like and to you, where you come from that perspective of harm reduction.
So it can obviously be applied in so many different situations, but just thinking like, because of the dynamics of my family, I know that some of my kids sometimes, we might have rages every now and then, sometimes more often than I would like. Um, and really, instead of having a mindset of trying to avoid rages altogether, it's not going to happen. My kids have a brain injury, And so we're not going to avoid the rages. So looking at harm reduction, and it might sound a little strange, especially to if anybody, is, maybe a family member of a caregiver of somebody that has FASD, but not living that day-to-day life. So this might sound strange to those types, but kind of prepping for what to do when the rage happens, trying to be prepared for it, planning that it's going to happen at some point. And so harm reduction could be a lot of different things, like maybe we're not decorating with, a heavy glass bowl on our coffee table, or even big, what do they call them, like the coffee table books, that are big picture books, art and things like that. Just thinking in terms like that, like keeping things that could be projectiles, because they will be projectiles. When a kiddo is raging, they are in fight or flight, and they're not thinking, I don't want to break this, or I don't want to hurt anybody. Their brain is on fire, things are happening, and whatever is near them is likely to go flying. So, we just came out of the holidays. So even with decorating for the holidays, a lot of times I choose things that are cloth, or maybe wood, as long as it's not heavy wood. So just things like that, it's not like a solution to how to keep the rage from happening, but just getting, almost like getting curious about it, think ahead. If your child rages, think ahead. What does it look like when it happens? What can I do to make sure that everybody is safe during that time, including my kiddo? We don't want them getting hurt either. Or not only do we not want them getting hurt, we also don't want them feeling shame afterwards, and afterwards when they are becoming regulated again, most of our kids are very remorseful and very, quick to apologize. And I never wanted mine to be, looking around the house and seeing all the destruction that they caused, because they didn't cause it. Their brain injury caused it. So that's one way that I try to look at things. And again, it's not like a solution, um, but it's just, trying to guide them through a rage in a way that we just minimize the harm.
That's such a really great idea. And I'll piggyback off of that for just a second, because, Jay has a really hard time sometimes with rages, and, he knows that, we know that he would never intentionally, spitefully, when he's in his thinking brain, hurt anybody, right? He's just the sweetest and the kindest and the most loving and giving kiddo. And
Mhm.
then when the lid is flipped, right, when we are not in thinking and we're in full survival mode, thinking too about the littles, right, when we've got our other family members, and as parents, our job is to protect all of the kids in our home. you know the time that DCF came to our home because we had a report put in. And for those of you that may be watching outside of the state of Florida, DCF is our Department of Children and Families. Yes, we were families that had allegations called on us. And we try to explain, like, we had already implemented an in-home safety plan on our own, where my youngest knew exactly what to do when her brother started having a hard time. Her older brother knew what to do. Her older brother has a phone. So if it got to the point at any time when we needed help from outside, if it got beyond being able as a caregiver to support it, like, there was a plan in place. And I think that's really important to be okay with, that we're not walking this typical parenting journey, and that it's okay for things to look a little bit different for us. And, if an in-home safety plan is something that makes sense to you because you do have these other struggles for your kiddos and with your kiddos, I just want to say that, like, I'm not the only caregiver that I know of that's had to do that. So, and it's just, it can be hard, but when we can accept that that's the place that we're in, it makes it a whole lot easier to be able to move forward. And with that, I'm going to pass the mic to you, Pam, because you've got a great piece to kind of wrap all of that up.
Well, I would like to say that I am often part of the problem. Um, I last weekend we had a really big issue with my son, and he lied to me about where he was going. And I was devastated and heartbroken and angry, so angry. Um, and but after I vented the anger in an appropriate way to an appropriate person and not my son, but thank God for that. Sometimes the things that we live through are really maddening. They're really, really hard. No one tells you these kinds of things can happen. And so, I mean, thank goodness now I have tools where I can vent to an appropriate person. Um, but I had to go back and look at my part. What was my part in the problem last weekend? I love someone and I believed someone who I cannot trust. I keep doing that. So the class that Barb is doing for us, Barb Clark, she's amazing. She texted me this week and called me a friend. I just absolutely adore Barb. She's brilliant. And there's so much in that class. Like I can tell you the science behind lying, which is often confabulation. I can tell you the neuroscience behind the impulsiveness of stealing things. The rules live on this side of the brain, but the actions might live on this side, and I probably have them wrong. But the actions happen before the brain can stop them because the rules aren't in the same place. There's lots of neuroscience to back up what Barb is going to teach us. And I think that's really important for me to go over as a caregiver over and over and over again. But for me, my piece of it, my tip to myself is the 3 A's: awareness, acceptance, and action. I have to become aware that I love someone who has a problem. And whether the problem is lying or stealing or raging, like I have to quit pretending it's never going to happen again. Like that's my favorite thing. Oh, this is it. It's never happening again. We're done. We've survived. But that is not the truth. The truth is it will almost certainly happen again. And I can use that time to prepare for next time. But it takes a couple of times for me to become aware that this really is happening and it's going to happen again. Once I become aware of that, so I'm very aware now that I could have a problem with dishonesty in the future. Okay. So then I can start to accept this in my heart and understand. And so the acceptance is really hard for me right now is I keep wanting to give my son freedom. And it reminds me of things like Rosemary was saying, and even Crystal, like the freedom to try these things. Like I want my son to be as independent as possible. Sometimes they're not able to do that yet. They're maybe not able to walk in the grocery store yet or walk through that checkout line with all of the delicious sugary treats calling their name. So like it's just becoming aware of that and then accepting that my son needs more parenting, more supervision, more monitoring, whatever you want to call it, than the typical child his age. And then once I accept it, then I can take action. So for me, it's the awareness, acceptance, action, but there's always a lull for me between each stage, which I find frustrating. But I think that might be part of the human condition. So that's just what I was thinking about on this topic. And then every time this training comes up, I watch it again and again. Barb is brilliant. The strategies in the training are amazing, but it also helps me remember, like, I'm not crazy. Other people have this. It's not a fault of my own for bad parenting. Other people struggle with this. I'm not alone. And there's hope that way. That's what I would say.
What a perfect way to wrap that up. That's awesome. I
Yeah.
love knowing and sharing about the hope because I think all four of us would say after learning and doing things maybe a little bit differently, we have definitely gotten our own shifts, right? From the really, really hard feeling alone and isolated to the, okay, maybe we're not total failures as parents, and our kids are having a hard time and we're having a hard time. So just to those of you who are also in the trenches, we want you to know that you are not alone. We are doing this with you, and parenting is hard sometimes. So with that being said, we'd love for you to join us if you catch the live version of Barb's training. We'll also have it available as a recording down the road. So just reach out to us if you have any questions about it. But from those of us with the FASD Collective, Shifts That Work, we thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.